A hostage negotiator talks a kidnapper into releasing a family, using almost the exact same words he later teaches car salesmen to use on a stubborn customer. A psychology professor gets talked into buying magazine subscriptions he never wanted, twice, by the same student, using a technique he'd go on to spend his entire career studying. A door-to-door encyclopedia salesman, the shyest kid in his graduating class, becomes the highest earner in the company within a year, without changing a single word of his pitch. Nobody warns you that selling has almost nothing to do with the product. It's a transfer of certainty from one person's head into another's, and the person who's more certain almost always wins, whether or not they're actually right. The FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator, who discovered that the tactics that got a hostage released alive worked just as well getting a landlord to lower the rent. The social psychologist who ran experiment after experiment and kept finding the same 6 shortcuts hijacking people's yes, whether they were buying a car or donating to a stranger on the street. The researcher who sat through the transcripts of 35,000 real sales calls and discovered the representatives closing the biggest deals were barely pitching at all. The insurance salesman who nearly quit the business in his first year, until he realized the problem was never his script, it was the story he was telling himself every time someone said no. The academic who studied thousands of sales representatives and found the type everyone assumed would win, the tireless relationship builder, actually lost more often than the one who walked in and challenged the customer's own thinking. None of them found a formula that guarantees someone says yes. They found something more useful than that. These 10 books are what they found. And the number 1 pick isn't a sales book at all. I ranked these by how much they actually change the way you sell the moment you're standing in front of someone who hasn't decided yet, not by how many copies they sold. And for each one, I'm going to break down the actual ideas inside. Not just the title and a one-line summary. Number 10. Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount. Blount's core argument, built from training tens of thousands of sales teams across dozens of industries, is that the single biggest cause of a salesperson's failure isn't skill, product, or price, it's an empty pipeline, and an empty pipeline is always the direct result of prospecting that stopped. His key concept is the 30-day rule. The effort you put into prospecting this month determines the deals that show up roughly 90 days from now. Which means the income problem a salesperson feels today was actually created by the prospecting they skipped 3 months ago. And Blount argues most representatives quit prospecting the moment their pipeline looks full, not realizing the gap they're creating won't show up as a crisis until it's too late to fix quickly. A concrete example he gives. A rep closes the biggest deal of his career, takes 2 celebratory weeks off from cold calling to coast on the high, and then watches his pipeline quietly collapse 90 days later, right when he assumed he'd finally earned a break. And Blount uses the story to argue that fanatical, non-negotiable, daily prospecting blocks aren't optional busywork, they're the one habit that protects every salesperson from a crisis they won't see coming until it arrives. Link to grab this one is in the description, timestamped below. Number 9. The Psychology of Selling by Brian Tracy. Tracy's core argument, drawn from his own start as a door-to-door salesman who nearly failed out of the industry, is that selling is roughly 80% psychology and only 20% technique, and most training programs spend all their time on the 20%. His key concept is the salesperson's self-concept. The internal picture of how much someone believes they deserve to earn, how they expect prospects to treat them, and how personally they take a rejection. And Tracy argues that 2 equally trained salespeople, given the same script and the same territory, will produce wildly different results, because one has quietly decided rejection means something is wrong with the product, and the other has decided it means nothing about them at all. A concrete example he gives. Tracy himself spends his first year in sales barely surviving, until an older salesman explains that every no isn't a personal verdict, it's simply the average number of numbers standing between him and the yes he's owed if he keeps his numbers up. And the moment Tracy starts counting numbers instead of fearing them, his income begins climbing without him changing a single word of his pitch. What makes this book different from fanatical prospecting is that Blount is giving you the daily discipline of prospecting itself, while Tracy is arguing that discipline collapses anyway if the psychology underneath it, how you handle being told no, was never fixed first. Link is in the description. Number 8. Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. Rackham's core argument, built from a research team that studied the transcripts of over 35,000 real sales calls, is that the techniques that work for a small, low-cost sale actively backfire in a large, complex one, because the more expensive the decision, the more the customer resents being pitched. His key concept is the 4 question types, asked in sequence. Situation questions, gathering basic facts about the customer's current setup. Problem questions, surfacing the specific difficulties that setup is causing. Implication questions, getting the customer to state out loud how serious those difficulties actually are. And need payoff questions, letting the customer describe the value of solving it, in their own words. And Rackham found that top performers spent most of a call asking, almost never pitching, because a need the customer voices themselves is far more convincing than the same need announced by a salesperson. A concrete example he gives. A rep selling expensive manufacturing equipment resists the urge to list features, and instead asks a customer to walk through what a single hour of downtime actually costs the factory. And once the customer says the number out loud themselves, the rep barely has to sell anything. The customer has already built the case for buying. What makes this book different from The Psychology of Selling is that Tracy is fixing what happens inside the salesperson's head before the call ever starts. While Rackham is proving, with hard data, that the actual words used during the call matter just as much, and that most salespeople are asking exactly the wrong ones. Links in the description. Number 7. To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink. Pink's core argument, drawn from research showing roughly 1 in 9 Americans work in traditional sales while the rest still spend huge portions of their day moving other people, is that almost everyone is in sales now, whether or not it's in their job title. His key concept is the new ABCs, replacing the old always be closing. Attunement, the ability to see a situation from someone else's perspective instead of just your own. Buoyancy, the emotional resilience to survive a wave of rejection without it sinking your next pitch. And clarity, the skill of helping someone see their own problem in a sharper, more useful way than they saw it before you showed up. And Pink argues the old pushy, high-pressure closer archetype doesn't just feel outdated, it actively performs worse than these 3 traits in an economy where the buyer usually knows more than the seller. A concrete example he gives. Pink cites research on introverts, extroverts, and a lesser-known middle group called ambiverts, and finds that ambiverts consistently outsell extroverts, because they know when to talk and, more importantly, when to just listen. And he uses it to dismantle the assumption that the loudest, most naturally outgoing person in the room is automatically the best salesperson in it. What makes this book different from spin selling is that Rackham is giving you a specific sequence of questions to run inside a single sales call. While Pink is arguing that the traits underneath those questions, attunement, buoyancy, and clarity, are what any person moving any idea needs, whether they're selling a product or just convincing their kid to eat vegetables. Grab it using the link below. Number 6. The Challenger Sale by Matthew Dixon and Brent Adamson. Dixon and Adamson's core argument, built from a study of thousands of B2B sales representatives across dozens of industries, is that the salesperson everyone assumes wins, the tireless, likable relationship builder, actually finishes near the bottom of the performance rankings. Their key concept is the 5 rep profiles, and the one that consistently wins complex sales, the challenger. A rep who teaches the customer something new about their own business. Tailors that insight specifically to what that customer cares about. And takes control of the conversation with confidence, even when it means respectfully pushing back on what the customer thinks they already know. And the authors argue this feels risky to most salespeople, because it means occasionally making a customer a little uncomfortable instead of just agreeing with everything they say. A concrete example they give. A challenger rep opens a meeting not by asking what the customer needs, but by presenting data the customer had never seen, showing exactly where their current process was quietly losing money. And the authors show that this single move, teaching before selling, is what got the customer leaning forward and asking for a proposal, instead of the rep having to chase one. What makes this book different from To Sell is Human is that Pink is describing traits useful for almost anyone moving an idea, while Dixon and Adamson are making a much sharper, more specific claim that in complex B2B sales, being liked is worth far less than being the person who taught the customer something they didn't know. Link is in the description. Number 5. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Carnegie's core argument, developed from the public speaking and communication courses he ran during the Great Depression, is that people are not creatures of logic, they're creatures of ego and emotion, and no pitch works until the other person feels genuinely understood first. His key concept is becoming genuinely interested in other people before ever trying to interest them in you, which means asking questions, remembering details, and listening for what someone actually cares about, instead of waiting for your turn to talk about the product. And Carnegie argues this single shift, talking less about yourself and more about the other person, wins more goodwill than any clever line ever could. A concrete example he gives. Carnegie describes a man who spends an entire evening at a dinner party letting a botanist talk about houseplants, asking questions, and saying almost nothing about himself. And afterward the botanist tells the host that the man was the most interesting conversationalist he'd ever met, despite the man having said almost nothing himself. What makes this book different from the Challenger sale is that Dixon and Adamson are teaching you to lead with insight, even when it creates friction. While Carnegie is arguing that most sales are lost long before any insight matters, in the first few minutes, by a salesperson who was too busy being interesting to be interested. Links in the description. Number 4. Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff. Klaff's core argument, drawn from personally raising over $400 million pitching investors, is that a purely logical, well-reasoned pitch almost always fails, because the primitive part of a listener's brain, what he calls the crock brain, filters out complexity and unfamiliar ideas as a threat before logic ever gets a vote. His key concept is frame control. The idea that every pitch is a silent contest between the pitcher's frame and the listener's frame, and whoever's frame survives the meeting controls how the entire conversation gets interpreted. And Klaff argues most salespeople lose this contest immediately by walking in eager to please, which signals neediness, and neediness is the single fastest way to hand control of the frame to the other side. A concrete example he gives. In the middle of pitching a group of skeptical investors, Klaff notices he's losing the room, and instead of pushing harder, he calmly announces he doesn't think the deal is a fit for them and starts packing up to leave. And the investors, suddenly afraid of losing something they'd been dismissing seconds earlier, ask him to stay and pitch the rest of the deal. What makes this book different from How to Win Friends and Influence People is that Carnegie is teaching you to win someone over by focusing entirely on them, while Klaff is arguing that in high-stakes pitches, some amount of controlled detachment, even a willingness to walk away, wins more deals than eagerness ever will. Link is in the description. Number 3. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Voss's core argument, built from years as the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator, is that the tactics that get a hostage released alive work just as well in a salary negotiation or a business deal, because both situations come down to the same thing: getting someone to feel safe enough to tell you the truth. His key concept is tactical empathy, paired with specific tools. Mirroring, repeating the last few words someone said to get them to keep talking. Labeling, naming the emotion you sense in the room out loud, it sounds like you're worried about the timeline. And calibrated questions, open-ended how and what questions that get the other side to solve your problem for you, instead of a yes or no question they can simply refuse. And Voss argues the real goal of any negotiation isn't getting a yes, which people say just to get you to leave them alone, it's getting a genuine "that's right" the moment someone feels truly heard. A concrete example he gives. During a hostage negotiation, Voss avoids asking "will you let the hostages go?" and instead asks open questions about what the kidnappers actually need, slowly getting them to talk themselves into a resolution rather than being cornered into one. And he later uses the identical calibrated question technique to negotiate his own son's college tuition down, proving the tactic works whether the stakes are life or death or just financial. What makes this book different from Pitch Anything is that Klaff is focused on controlling the frame of a single high-stakes pitch, while Voss is arguing that in almost every negotiation, control matters less than making the other side feel so heard that they hand you the information you need to win, without ever feeling like they lost. Links in the description. Number 2. Start with No by Jim Camp. Camp's core argument, built from decades negotiating high-stakes corporate deals, is that the popular advice to seek a win-win quietly trains negotiators to compromise too early, and that neediness, the visible desire to close a deal, is the single most damaging thing a salesperson can bring into a room. His key concept is inverting the entire goal of a negotiation. Instead of chasing a yes, which Camp considers close to worthless since people say yes to be polite all the time, deliberately invite a no early, because a no means the other side finally feels safe enough to tell you what they actually think. And once real objections are on the table, an honest deal can finally get built, instead of a fragile one held together by a premature yes. And Camp argues that a negotiator who can only measure success by whether a deal closed today will always be out-negotiated by one who measures success by their own discipline and behavior, regardless of the outcome. A concrete example he gives. Camp coaches a salesperson to open a high-pressure meeting by explicitly telling the buyer feel free to say no at any point, a move that feels backwards to most people trained to chase agreement. And he shows that the buyer, no longer feeling cornered into a decision, relaxes enough to actually negotiate honestly, producing a far stronger deal than the version where the buyer felt pressured into a fast yes. What makes this book different from Never Split the Difference is that Voss is using empathy and calibrated questions to make the other side feel safe enough to reveal the truth. While Camp goes a layer further, arguing that a negotiator has to release their own need for the deal to close at all, or every empathetic tactic in the world gets undermined by the desperation still leaking through underneath it. Link is in the description. And number 1. Influence by Robert Cialdini. Unlike every other book on this list, this one isn't a sales book at all. It's a work of experimental psychology, built from Cialdini going undercover for years as a trainee in sales jobs, fundraising drives, and advertising agencies, just to study persuasion from the inside. Cialdini's central claim is that human beings rely on a small set of automatic mental shortcuts to decide who and what to say yes to, and that anyone who understands those shortcuts can trigger them deliberately, for better or worse. His key concept is the 6 principles of influence. Reciprocity, the deep obligation people feel to return a favor, even one they never asked for. Commitment and consistency, the pressure people feel to act in line with something they already said or did publicly. Social proof, the tendency to look at what everyone else is doing before deciding what's correct. Liking, the fact that people say yes far more often to someone they like, for reasons that often have nothing to do with the offer itself. Authority, the automatic deference people give to anyone who appears to be a credible expert. And scarcity, the sudden spike in desire the instant something seems limited or about to disappear. And Cialdini shows these shortcuts fire automatically, beneath conscious thought, in trained negotiators and first-time customers alike. A concrete example he returns to. A supermarket that offers free samples sees sales of that product jump dramatically, not because the sample proved the product was good, but because accepting a free sample quietly triggers the obligation to reciprocate by buying something in return. And Cialdini uses the study to argue that the sample was never really about taste testing at all, it was a switch, and once it was flipped, most shoppers didn't stand a chance against their own wiring. What makes this book the definitive number 1 on this list is that every other title here is teaching you what to say, ask, or do inside a specific sales conversation. Cialdini is explaining the underlying hardware that determines why any of it works in the first place. The 6 switches every technique on this list is quietly flipping, whether the person using them realizes it or not. Link is in the description. The number 1 pick proves something simple. A script can tell you what to say. Only an understanding of why people say yes at all tells you which script is actually worth saying. Which of these have you read, and which one changed how you think about selling? Drop it in the comments.